The sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Agua Caliente, Arizona Territory. In the summer of 1878, when Abigail Keating first arrived with nothing but a weathered carpet bag and secrets trailing behind her like hungry wolves. Her chestnut hair was pinned tightly beneath a modest bonnet, her green eyes darting nervously at every face that turned her way as she stepped down from the stagecoach. She had calculated that a town this small and remote would be the perfect place to disappear, but she hadn't counted on being followed. The journey west had drained what little money she possessed, forcing her to take immediate work at the Lucky Spur saloon serving drinks to dust-covered cowboys and miners. It wasn't respectable employment for a woman who had once been the daughter of a prosperous Boston merchant, but respectability had become a luxury she could no longer afford. "Another whiskey for the gentleman at the corner table," Martha, the stout woman who owned the Lucky Spur, barked at Abigail. "And try to smile, girl. Men don't tip well for sour faces." Abigail nodded and filled a glass with the amber liquid, carrying it carefully through the crowded room. The saloon buzzed with conversation, piano music, and occasional bursts of raucous laughter. 3 weeks in Agua Caliente had taught her to keep her head down and her ears open. This remote desert town operated on gossip and secrets, neither of which Abigail could afford. As she placed the whiskey before a bearded miner, the batwing doors of the saloon swung open, bringing with them a gust of hot air and 3 men Abigail had prayed never to see again. Her blood ran cold as she recognized the tall, imposing figure of Victor Thornton, her late husband's business partner, flanked by 2 of his hired guns. The sight of them sent her stomach plummeting as if she'd stepped off a cliff. "I'm looking for a woman," Thornton announced to the suddenly quiet room. "Pretty thing, chestnut hair, green eyes, calls herself Abigail Keating." His cruel eyes swept across the saloon, though she might go by a different name now. Abigail froze, the empty serving tray clutched against her chest like a shield. Martha glanced at her with narrowed eyes, clearly noting her reaction. With a slight nod toward the back door, the older woman stepped forward. "Don't know any Abigail," Martha said firmly. "But we got plenty of girls here happy to keep you company if you're buying drinks." Thornton's lips curled in a sneer. "I'm not here for entertainment, madam. I'm here for justice. That woman is a thief and a murderer." The accusation hung in the air, and Abigail felt the weight of curious eyes turning toward her. Without waiting another moment, she slipped through the kitchen and out the back door of the saloon, her heart hammering against her ribs. The late afternoon sun blinded her momentarily as she ran down the alley, dust clouding around her skirts. She could hear shouting from inside the saloon they had discovered her escape. With no destination in mind except away, Abigail ran toward the edge of town where scattered homesteads gave way to open country. The sound of hoofbeats spurred her to move faster, though her sides ached and her lungs burned with each desperate breath. Ahead, she could see a large barn standing like a sentinel at the edge of a small ranch. Without hesitation, she changed course toward it, praying for sanctuary. Slipping through the partially open barn door, Abigail was enveloped in the comforting smell of hay and livestock. Sunlight streamed through cracks in the wooden walls, illuminating dancing dust motes. She pressed herself against the far wall, listening to the approaching riders. "She came this way. Fan out and check those buildings," Thornton's voice carried on the still air. Panic seized her as the hoofbeats drew closer. Darting behind a stack of hay bales near the back of the barn, Abigail crouched low, trying to quiet her ragged breathing. Footsteps crunched on the gravel outside and a shadow fell across the barn door. "Check in there, Walsh," Thornton ordered. "She's got to be hiding somewhere." The heavy tread of boots on wooden planks sent terror spiraling through her. Abigail pressed herself harder against the rough wooden wall, closing her eyes as if that might make her invisible. The footsteps paused, and she held her breath. Then, just as they began to move toward her hiding place, a new voice spoke from the doorway. "Can I help you gentlemen with something?" The voice was deep, unhurried, with a slight southern drawl that somehow managed to sound both polite and dangerous at the same time. "Just looking for a fugitive," Thornton replied smoothly. "Woman killed her husband back east. We tracked her to this town." "That's so." The newcomer's boots creaked on the floorboards as he stepped further into the barn. "Don't recall seeing any strange women around my property." "This is your land?" Thornton asked. "Every acre as far as you can see," came the reply. "Zachary Holloway at your service. Now, unless you gentlemen have a warrant, I'll have to ask you to clear out. My cattle get spooked easy by strangers." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Abigail hardly dared breathe. "We'll be on our way," Thornton finally said, his voice tight with barely contained anger. "But keep an eye out for her. She's dangerous and clever. Name's Abigail Keating. There's a substantial reward." "I'll keep that in mind," Zachary replied evenly. The sound of retreating footsteps and horses being mounted gradually faded. Still, Abigail remained frozen in place, unsure if it was safe to reveal herself. "They're gone now," the man called out softly. "You can come out." For a long moment, Abigail didn't move. Then, slowly, she emerged from behind the hay bales, ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. The man standing in the center of the barn was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. His blue eyes assessed her carefully, but without the predatory gleam she'd come to fear in men's gazes. A gun belt hung low on his hips, and his clothes, though dusty from work, were of good quality. "Thank you," Abigail managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're the woman they're looking for?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. Abigail nodded slightly, her eyes darting toward the door. "I should go. I don't want to bring trouble to you." "Those men didn't strike me as the type interested in justice," Zachary observed, making no move to stop her but positioning himself casually between her and the door. "More the type looking to collect some kind of payment." "They are," Abigail admitted, "but I can't stay here. They'll come back." "Probably," he agreed, "which is why you need somewhere better to hide than behind my hay bales." He studied her for a moment. "Are you hungry, Miss Keating?" The unexpected question made her blink in surprise. "Yes." "Then come up to the house. We can talk about what comes next after you've eaten." Abigail hesitated, weighing her options. This stranger had just lied to protect her, but that didn't mean she could trust him. As if reading her thoughts, Zachary smiled slightly. "I'm not asking for your story yet, madam. Just offering food and shelter to someone who looks like they could use both." Before she could respond, hoofbeats sounded again in the distance. Zachary moved quickly to the barn door and peered out. "They're coming back," he said grimly, "with more men." Fear clutched at Abigail's throat. "I need to run." "No," Zachary cut her off, his voice firm. "That's what they'll expect." He glanced around the barn, then pointed to a ladder leading to a hayloft. "Up there, quick." Without questioning, Abigail gathered her skirts and climbed, concealing herself among the sweet-smelling hay just as the riders approached. Through a crack in the floorboards, she could see Zachary casually begin to groom a handsome chestnut horse, as if he'd been at the task all afternoon. The barn door swung open, and Thornton strode in with 4 men behind him. "Mr. Holloway," he said coldly, "I believe you're harboring a fugitive." Zachary didn't look up from his work. "I believe I already told you there's no one here but me." "One of my men saw a woman running in this direction," Thornton insisted. We're going to search this barn and then your house." Now Zachary did look up, his hand moving subtly closer to his holstered gun. "No, you're not. This is my property, and unless you've somehow acquired a legal warrant in the past 15 minutes, you're trespassing." Two of Thornton's men spread out, hands hovering near their weapons. The tension in the barn crackled like lightning before a storm. "I don't think you understand the kind of woman you're protecting," Thornton said. "She murdered her husband in cold blood and stole a fortune that rightfully belongs to his business partners, myself included." "I understand you're on my land making threats," Zachary replied, his voice dangerously soft. "And I understand that the sheriff in these parts is a good friend of mine who doesn't take kindly to Eastern businessmen bringing trouble to Agua Caliente." The standoff stretched for what felt like an eternity to Abigail, watching helplessly from above. Finally, Thornton took a step back. "We'll be watching, Holloway," he warned. "She can't hide forever." "Good day, gentlemen," was Zachary's only response. When they had gone, this time for real, Zachary waited several minutes before calling up to her. "It's safe now." Abigail descended the ladder on shaky legs, dust and bits of hay clinging to her dress. As her feet touched the ground, her knees nearly buckled beneath her. Zachary reached out to steady her, his hand gentle on her arm. "You're safe here," he said quietly, his blue eyes holding hers with unexpected intensity. "No one hurts you again while I'm breathing." The fierce protection in his voice nearly undid her. After weeks of running, of looking over her shoulder, the simple promise of safety was overwhelming. "You don't know me," she whispered. "You don't know what I've done." "I know those men," Zachary replied. "Men like that, they make their own truth. Whatever you did or didn't do, you deserve a fair chance." He released her arm and stepped back. "My offer of food still stands. After that, you can tell me as much or as little as you want." Abigail studied him, this stranger who had just risked his life for her. Common sense told her to continue running, but exhaustion and hunger made the decision for her. "Thank you," she said simply. Zachary nodded once, then led her from the barn toward a sturdy 2-story house that stood about 50 yards away. As they walked, Abigail noticed the well-maintained fences, the healthy cattle grazing in the distance, and the flourishing garden beside the house. This was no struggling homestead but a prosperous ranch. Inside, the house was unexpectedly well furnished, with polished wood floors and comfortable furniture. Zachary gestured toward a chair at a large oak table. "Sit," he said. "I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage beans and bacon." While he busied himself at the stove, Abigail took in her surroundings more carefully. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes that suggested an educated mind. No photographs or personal mementos adorned the mantel, but the house felt lived in, if solitary. "You live here alone?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Just me and the ranch hands," Zachary replied, placing a steaming plate before her. "They've got quarters out back, 8 of them, good men all." He sat across from her with his own plate. "Eat, you look half-starved." The simple food tasted better than anything Abigail could remember. She ate slowly, savoring each bite and the rare feeling of security that came with it. "How long have you been running?" Zachary asked after they had eaten in silence for several minutes. Abigail set down her fork. 6 weeks. They caught up to me in Santa Fe, but I managed to get away. I thought Agua Caliente would be remote enough. Thornton doesn't strike me as a man who gives up easily." "No," she agreed quietly. "He isn't." Zachary refilled her coffee cup. "Did you do what he claimed, kill your husband?" The blunt question hung in the air between them. Abigail's hands tightened around the warm cup. "My husband died," she said carefully, "but not by my hand. Henry was Thornton's business partner in a shipping company. They were importing goods from China: tea, silk, porcelain. At least that's what I believed. She took a shaky breath. 3 months ago, I discovered they were also smuggling opium, enormous quantities of it. Zachary listened without interruption, his expression giving nothing away. When I confronted Henry, he admitted everything. Said it was too profitable to stop. We argued, and he had never been a gentle man, but that night, her voice faltered. I feared for my life. During the struggle, he fell, hit his head on the marble fireplace hearth. He died instantly. Self-defense, Zachary observed. Abigail laughed bitterly. Thornton didn't see it that way. He arrived shortly after, saw what had happened, and offered me a bargain. He would help me cover up Henry's death if I signed over my husband's share of the business to him. She met Zachary's eyes directly. I agreed. At first I was terrified of being hanged for murder. But then I found Henry's ledgers. They detailed everything: the opium, bribes to officials, even murders of competitors. I took the ledgers and fled. And that's what Thornton wants, evidence that could destroy him. Yes, Abigail confirmed. The ledgers are worth far more than any fortune I supposedly stole. With them, Thornton could hang. Zachary stood and walked to the window, looking out at the gathering dusk. You need to get those ledgers to the proper authorities. I tried in Denver, Abigail said. The marshal there was in Thornton's pocket. He nearly caught me then. She pushed her plate away, suddenly losing her appetite. I don't know who to trust anymore. Turning back to face her, Zachary's expression was resolute. Judge Isaac Montgomery rides circuit through here. He's as honest as they come, with enough influence to make charges stick, even against someone like Thornton. He'll be in Tucson next week. Tucson is a 3-day ride, Abigail said, hope warring with caution in her voice. Thornton will be watching the roads. Not all roads, Zachary replied with a slight smile. There are paths through these mountains only locals know. He studied her for a moment. Where are the ledgers now? Abigail hesitated, years of caution making her reluctant to reveal her last secret. I understand your hesitation, Zachary said gently, but if we're going to help each other, there needs to be trust. They're sewn into the lining of my carpet bag, she admitted finally. I left it at the boarding house when I fled. Zachary nodded thoughtfully. Mrs. Winters runs that place. She's discreet, won't have turned your belongings over to strangers. He glanced out the window again. It's getting dark. I'll ride into town at first light to retrieve your bag. What about Thornton? He'll be watching the town. Let me worry about Thornton, Zachary said. For tonight, you need rest. There's a spare bedroom upstairs. It's not fancy, but it's clean. The sudden kindness from this stranger left Abigail momentarily speechless. Why are you helping me? She finally asked. You're risking everything for someone you just met. Zachary was quiet for a long moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. 8 years ago, I watched a man hang for a crime he didn't commit because those with money and influence wanted him gone. His jaw tightened at the memory. I was too young, too powerless to stop it then. I promised myself I'd never stand by and let it happen again. The simple honesty in his voice left no room for doubt. Abigail felt something shift inside her, the first fragile bloom of trust. Thank you, she said softly. Get some rest, Miss Keating, Zachary replied. Tomorrow we'll come early. The bedroom he showed her to was indeed simple but comfortable, with a freshly made bed and a small window overlooking the ranch. After weeks of running and sleeping in cheap boarding houses, the quiet security of the room was a luxury beyond measure. As exhaustion finally overtook her, Abigail's last thoughts were of the unexpected cowboy who had promised her safety with such conviction. She wondered what kind of man makes such a promise to a stranger, and whether, against all odds, he might actually be able to keep it. Dawn broke with the distant lowing of cattle and the scent of coffee wafting up the stairs. Abigail woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day came rushing back. She sat up quickly, listening for sounds of danger but hearing only the normal stirrings of a ranch coming to life. After washing her face in the basin provided and pinning her hair as neatly as possible, she made her way downstairs. Zachary stood at the stove, cooking eggs in a cast iron skillet. He looked up as she entered, nodding in greeting. "Sleep well?" he asked, sliding eggs onto 2 plates. "Better than I have in weeks," Abigail admitted, accepting the offered breakfast. "Thank you." They ate in companionable silence until Zachary pushed his empty plate aside and stood. "I need to head into town for your belongings. My foreman, Daniel, knows you're here. If there's trouble, he'll help you." "I should go with you," Abigail protested. "It's my risk to take." "Thornton's men will be watching for you," Zachary countered. Not for a rancher making his normal supply run. He strapped on his gun belt and reached for his hat. "Stay inside. Daniel will keep an eye out." Before Abigail could argue further, Zachary was gone. Through the window, she watched him mount a powerful black gelding and ride toward town, his straight-backed figure gradually disappearing into the distance. Left alone in the unfamiliar house, Abigail fought against the anxiety that threatened to overwhelm her. To distract herself, she began to clean up from breakfast, then found herself wandering the rooms, learning more about her mysterious benefactor through his possessions. The bookshelves revealed an eclectic taste. Volumes of law and history stood alongside poetry and adventure novels. A desk in the corner held neatly organized papers that appeared to be ranch accounts. Everything spoke of a methodical, educated mind. In the study, a small photograph in a silver frame caught her eye. It showed a much younger Zachary standing proudly beside an older man with the same strong jaw and piercing eyes. Both wore the uniforms of Confederate officers. Abigail studied it thoughtfully, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. The sound of approaching horses jerked her attention back to the present. Heart racing, she moved to the window, hoping to see Zachary returning. Instead, her blood ran cold at the sight of Victor Thornton and 6 armed men riding toward the house. Panic threatened to paralyze her, but Abigail forced herself to think clearly. She couldn't run. They would see her immediately in the open country surrounding the ranch. Fighting was equally impossible. That left only hiding and hoping they wouldn't search too thoroughly. A shout from outside drew her attention. A weathered man in his 50s, Daniel, she presumed had emerged from one of the outbuildings and was walking toward the approaching riders, his hand resting casually near his holstered pistol. "Mr. Thornton," Daniel called, his voice carrying clearly through the open window. "Mr. Holloway isn't here. He rode into town this morning." "That's convenient," Thornton replied, not bothering to dismount. "We're looking for the woman. We know she's here." "No women on this ranch," Daniel said firmly. "Just me and 7 cowboys who don't take kindly to uninvited guests." As if to emphasize his point, several ranch hands emerged from the bunkhouse and other buildings, all armed, all watching the intruders with wary hostility. Thornton's face darkened with anger, but even he could count the odds. "We'll wait for Holloway's return, then." "Your choice," Daniel shrugged, "but you'll wait from the road. This is private property." The tense standoff continued for several long moments before Thornton jerked his horse around. "We'll be watching," he threatened before leading his men back toward the main road. Abigail released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Daniel remained outside, clearly ensuring the unwelcome visitors truly left, while the other ranch hands returned to their duties, though several positioned themselves where they could keep watch. The hours stretched interminably as Abigail waited for Zachary's return. The sun climbed higher, then began its slow descent, and still there was no sign of him. By late afternoon, worry had taken firm root. Had Thornton's men found him in town? Was he injured? Or worse? Just as she was considering confiding in Daniel and asking for his help, the sound of a single horse approaching drew her to the window once more. Relief flooded through her at the sight of Zachary, apparently unharmed, with her carpet bag secured behind his saddle. She met him at the door, unable to hide her concern. "You were gone so long. Thornton was here with his men. They're watching the road." "I know," Zachary said grimly, handing her the carpet bag. "I saw them on my way back. Had to take a detour through the creek bed to avoid them." He closed the door firmly behind him. "They're getting bolder. Mrs. Winters said they searched your room at the boarding house, threatened her when she objected." "Is she all right?" Abigail asked, clutching her bag. "Shaken but unharmed. She's a tough old bird." Zachary removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. "But this confirms they won't be satisfied until they find you and those ledgers." Abigail sat at the table, her fingers working at the hidden stitches in her bag's lining. "We need to leave for Tucson," she said quietly. "Tonight." "Agreed," Zachary nodded. "I've asked Daniel to create a diversion at dawn, drive some cattle past Thornton's camp, make it look like we might be using the confusion to slip you out. Meanwhile, we'll leave through the western pass tonight." Her fingers found the stiff leather of the ledgers, and she carefully extracted 3 small books bound in red morocco. These contain everything: names, dates, amounts, enough to destroy Thornton and his entire operation. Zachary took one, flipping through pages of meticulous entries. His expression hardened as he read. "This goes beyond smuggling," he said quietly. "There are at least a dozen murders documented here." "Yes," Abigail confirmed, "including 3 customs officials and a rival businessman who threatened to expose them." Closing the ledger, Zachary met her eyes. "No wonder Thornton is desperate. This is a hanging offense." "Now you understand the risk you're taking," Abigail said softly. "These men won't hesitate to kill anyone who stands in their way." "I understood the risk when I decided to help you," Zachary replied, his voice steady. "Nothing in these books changes that." He stood, decisive. "Pack only what you absolutely need. We leave at midnight." The remainder of the evening passed in tense preparation. Zachary consulted maps with Daniel, planning their route to Tucson while avoiding the main roads. Abigail carefully repacked the ledgers, wrapping them in oilcloth to protect them from the elements. As midnight approached, Zachary led 2 horses from the barn, his black gelding and a sturdy paint mare for Abigail. Both were equipped with saddlebags containing provisions, canteens, and a few essential supplies. "The mare's name is Pepper," Zachary told her as he helped adjust her stirrups. "She's sure-footed and calm, even on mountain trails." Abigail stroked the horse's soft nose, grateful for the animal's steady presence. "I haven't ridden much since I was a girl," she admitted. "She'll take care of you," Zachary assured her. "Just stay relaxed and follow my lead." Daniel approached, leading a 3rd horse packed with additional supplies. "I'll ride with you as far as Rattlesnake Canyon," he told Zachary. "Make sure you're not followed." The night was clear, with a half moon providing just enough light to see by without making them too visible. They set out across Zachary's land, keeping to the shadows of trees when possible, riding in silence broken only by the soft thud of hooves on packed earth. Abigail was acutely aware of every sound, every shadow. The weight of the ledgers in her saddlebag seemed to grow heavier with each mile, a physical manifestation of the burden she carried. Yet for the first time since fleeing Boston, she felt a fragile hope taking root. If they could reach Judge Montgomery, if the evidence was as compelling as she believed, there might finally be justice. They rode through the night, Zachary leading them along barely visible trails that wound through rocky passes and dense stands of pine. As promised, Daniel left them at dawn after ensuring no pursuit had followed. "There's an old line shack about 6 hours ahead," Zachary told Abigail as they continued alone. "We can rest there during the hottest part of the day, then push on through the night." The Arizona landscape unfolded around them, stark, beautiful, and unforgiving. Red rock formations thrust upward like nature's cathedrals, while saguaro cacti stood sentinel across the rolling terrain. Despite her exhaustion and the constant fear of pursuit, Abigail found herself marveling at the wild grandeur. "It's beautiful," she said softly when they paused to water the horses at a small spring. "So different from anything I knew in Boston." Zachary nodded, his gaze sweeping the horizon. "It gets in your blood. I came west after the war, thinking I'd stay a year or two. That was 10 years ago," he smiled slightly. "Never could bring myself to leave." "You fought for the Confederacy," Abigail observed. "I saw the photograph." A shadow crossed Zachary's face. "I was 18 when Virginia seceded. My father was a colonel. Following him into the army seemed the only honorable choice." He hesitated. "It took years to understand that honor isn't always where we think it is." The personal admission hung in the air between them, creating a new kind of intimacy. Abigail found herself wanting to know more about this complex man who had risked everything to help her. "What brought you to Arizona?" she asked as they remounted and continued their journey. "After the war, there wasn't much left in Virginia for a defeated rebel," Zachary explained, his voice matter of fact rather than bitter. "I drifted west, worked as a ranch hand, a lawman for a while in Texas. 7 years ago, I won the deed to my ranch in a poker game from a man too drunk to know what cards he held." He glanced at her with a hint of a smile. "Not the most noble beginning, but I've built it into something I'm proud of." "You should be," Abigail said sincerely. "It's a fine ranch." The conversation flowed more easily after that, helping to pass the long hours in the saddle. Zachary told her about building his ranch from nearly nothing, the challenges of drought years and cattle rustlers. In turn, Abigail spoke of her childhood in Boston, her marriage at 19 to Henry Keating, a man 20 years her senior, who had been her father's business associate, and her gradual discovery of his true character. "I never loved Henry," she admitted as they finally reached the line shack Zachary had mentioned. "It was a marriage of convenience arranged by my father after his business failed. Henry wanted a young, presentable wife to improve his social standing. I wanted security and to help my family recover from financial ruin." She dismounted stiffly, her legs protesting after hours in the saddle. "I thought I was being practical. I didn't realize the price would be so high." The line shack was a simple one-room structure with a stone fireplace, a narrow cot, and a rough wooden table with 2 chairs. Despite its Spartan nature, to Abigail's weary body, it looked like a palace. Zachary quickly checked the interior before bringing in their saddlebags. "Not exactly the Agua Caliente hotel," he said with a wry smile, "but it's out of the sun and reasonably clean." "It's perfect," Abigail replied honestly, sinking gratefully onto one of the chairs. While Zachary tended to the horses, securing them in a small corral behind the shack, Abigail unpacked some of their provisions: salt pork, hard biscuits, dried apples, and coffee. By the time he returned, she had a simple meal laid out on the table. "You didn't have to do that," he said, looking pleasantly surprised. "I've been taking from you since the moment we met," Abigail replied. "It's the least I could do." They ate in companionable silence, the food simple but satisfying after the long ride. Afterward, exhaustion hit Abigail like a physical blow. "You should rest," Zachary said, noticing her drooping eyelids. "Take the cot, I'll keep watch." Too tired to argue, Abigail stretched out on the narrow bed, falling asleep almost instantly to the sound of Zachary cleaning his revolver at the table. She woke several hours later to find the shack bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Zachary was dozing in one of the chairs, his long legs stretched out before him and his hat pulled low over his eyes. Even in sleep, he maintained an air of vigilance, one hand resting near his holstered gun. As if sensing her gaze, he stirred, pushing his hat back and blinking away sleep. "Feel better?" he asked, his voice rough with fatigue. "Much," she replied, sitting up and smoothing her rumpled skirts. "Your turn to rest. I'll keep watch." Zachary looked like he might protest, but exhaustion won out. He moved to the cot, removing only his boots and gun belt before lying down. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened into sleep. Abigail quietly moved to the single window, peering out at the landscape bathed in late afternoon light. No sign of pursuit, no evidence that anyone knew of this remote shelter. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to truly believe they might succeed. She studied Zachary as he slept, struck by how different he was from the men she had known in Boston. There was a straightforwardness to him, an integrity that seemed to run bone deep. In just 2 days, he had become more than a rescuer. He was becoming a friend, and perhaps, whispered a small voice in her mind, something more. The thought startled her. After Henry, after all she had endured, romance was the furthest thing from her mind. Yet there was no denying the warm flutter in her chest when Zachary smiled at her, the sense of security she felt in his presence that went beyond physical protection. As if her thoughts had somehow reached him, Zachary stirred, his eyes opening to find her watching him. For a moment neither spoke, something unspoken passing between them in the golden light of the small cabin. Then Zachary sat up, breaking the spell. "We should get moving soon," he said, pulling on his boots. "We've got a lot of ground to cover before morning." They packed quickly and efficiently, leaving the shack as they had found it. The evening air was cooler, making for easier riding as they continued south toward Tucson. Zachary led them along an arroyo, using its natural contours to shield them from potential observers. "If we maintain this pace, we'll reach the outskirts of Tucson by dawn," he told her. "Judge Montgomery is staying at the Occidental Hotel. We'll go directly there." Abigail nodded, trying to ignore the growing ache in her back and legs from hours in the saddle. Every mile brought them closer to safety, to justice. She could endure discomfort for that. As night fully descended, the desert transformed. The temperature dropped sharply, and strange sounds carried on the still air: the distant howl of coyotes, the soft hooting of owls, the mysterious rustling of creatures unseen. The stars emerged, a spectacular canopy unlike anything Abigail had ever witnessed in the city. "It's like diamonds scattered across black velvet," she murmured, gazing upward. Zachary followed her gaze. "One of the things I love most about this country," he agreed. "Makes a man feel small but part of something vast at the same time." They rode in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Then Zachary raised his hand suddenly, signaling a halt. Abigail reined in beside him, instantly alert. "What is it?" she whispered. "Not sure," he replied, his voice low. "Thought I saw movement up ahead." They remained motionless, listening intently. For several long moments, there was nothing but the soft nickering of their horses and the whisper of the breeze. Then, unmistakably, came the sound of a horse snorting somewhere ahead of them in the darkness. "Could be wild horses," Abigail suggested hopefully. "Could be," Zachary agreed, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Stay here." Before she could protest, he had dismounted and moved forward on foot, his revolver drawn. Abigail watched his shadowy figure disappear into the darkness, her heart hammering against her ribs. The minutes stretched interminably. Then, from somewhere ahead, came the unmistakable sound of a gunshot, followed immediately by a second. Abigail's blood ran cold. "Zachary!" She called, forgetting caution in her fear for his safety. No answer came. Fighting panic, Abigail made a split-second decision. She couldn't leave him, couldn't abandon the man who had risked everything for her. Gathering her courage, she urged Pepper forward, following the direction Zachary had taken. She hadn't gone far when a figure loomed out of the darkness. Abigail reached for the small derringer Zachary had given her for protection, only to let her hand fall away in relief when she recognized him. "Are you hurt?" she asked anxiously, noting how he clutched his left arm. "Just a graze," Zachary assured her, though his voice was tight with pain. "Thornton's men, at least 4 of them, waiting in ambush." He swung back into his saddle with visible effort. "We need to move now." "They'll be regrouping." "How did they know we'd come this way?" Abigail asked as they urged their horses to a faster pace, veering away from their planned route. "They didn't," Zachary replied grimly. "They've probably got men watching all the likely routes to Tucson." He glanced at her, his expression hard to read in the darkness. "Someone must have talked, someone in town who knew I went to retrieve your bag." The implication was clear. Their plan had been compromised. Judge Montgomery might no longer represent safety if Thornton had reached him first. "What do we do now?" Abigail asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Zachary was silent for a long moment, clearly weighing their options. "We can't risk the main road to Tucson now," he finally said. "There's a settlement about 15 miles west of here, San Xavier. The mission there has a telegraph office. We can wire the federal marshal in Yuma directly." They pushed their horses harder, following a faint game trail that wound through increasingly rocky terrain. The sound of pursuit faded behind them, but neither relaxed their vigilance. Thornton's men could be paralleling their route, waiting for another opportunity to ambush them. An hour later, disaster struck. Pepper stepped into a concealed prairie dog hole, stumbling badly. Though Abigail managed to stay mounted, the mare came up limping, unable to bear weight on her right foreleg. "She can't go on," Zachary said after examining the injury. "Tendons strained, maybe torn." "What do we do?" Abigail asked, stroking the mare's neck soothingly. Zachary looked around, assessing their situation. "There's a small box canyon about a mile back. Good water, enough grass for the horses. We can hole up there until morning. And then I ride to San Xavier alone while you wait with Pepper," he said, his tone making it clear he expected argument. "No," Abigail said firmly. "We stay together. Your horse can carry us both that far." Zachary shook his head. "Too slow, too risky. Thornton's men are still out there." "Exactly why we shouldn't separate," Abigail insisted. "Please, Zachary, I've seen what these men do to those who cross them." Their eyes locked in silent battle of wills. Finally, Zachary sighed. "We'll decide in the morning," he conceded. "For now, let's get to that canyon before Thornton's men pick up our trail again." They backtracked carefully, Zachary leading Pepper to minimize her discomfort. The canyon proved to be a perfect natural shelter, a narrow entrance that widened into a grassy bowl with a small spring bubbling from the rocks at the far end. High walls of red stone protected them on 3 sides, while the entrance could be easily watched. Zachary helped Abigail dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. In the pale moonlight, their eyes met, and Abigail felt a jolt of awareness that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with the man before her. The moment passed as Zachary turned away to tend the horses, but its effect lingered. Abigail busied herself laying out their bedrolls while Zachary built a small, nearly smokeless fire using dry cedar branches. The warmth was welcome against the desert night's chill. "Let me see your arm," Abigail said when the horses were settled. Zachary hesitated, then sat beside her, removing his jacket to reveal a blood-stained shirt sleeve. Carefully, Abigail rolled up the sleeve, exposing a bullet graze along his upper arm. The wound wasn't deep but had bled freely. "You're lucky," she said, reaching for the canteen to clean the injury. "A few inches to the right and we'd be in serious trouble." "Wouldn't be the first bullet I've taken," Zachary replied with a wry smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Abigail worked in silence, washing away the blood and dirt before binding the wound with strips torn from her petticoat. Her fingers moved gently across his skin, acutely aware of the solid strength of his arm, the quiet steadiness with which he endured her ministrations. "Thank you," he said when she had finished. "You've done this before." "I volunteered at a hospital in Boston during the war," Abigail explained, packing away the remaining makeshift bandages. "So many wounded men, too few hands to help them." Zachary studied her face in the firelight. "You continue to surprise me, Miss Keating." "Abigail," she corrected softly. "After all we've been through, I think you've earned the right to my given name." A smile warmed his eyes. "Abigail," he repeated, the name sounding different, special in his deep voice. "And I'm Zachary to you." They ate a sparse meal of jerky and hardtack, saving their dwindling supplies. The ledgers lay between them, a tangible reminder of the danger they still faced and the purpose that had brought them together. "Tell me what happens after," Zachary said suddenly. "If we succeed, if Thornton is brought to justice, what then?" The question caught Abigail off guard. She had been so focused on survival, on the immediate goal of delivering the evidence, that she had scarcely considered what might come after. "I don't know," she admitted. "I can't go back to Boston. Too many painful memories, too many people who believed Thornton's lies about me." She stared into the flames, considering. "I have a little money sewn into my dress, enough to start somewhere new, perhaps. San Francisco, maybe, or even back east to Philadelphia where I have a distant cousin." Zachary nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Good places, both of them. And you?" Abigail asked. "You'll return to your ranch, that's the plan," he agreed. "Got cattle to tend, a harvest to bring in." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks swirling upward. "It'll seem quiet after all this excitement." A strange melancholy settled over Abigail at the thought of their inevitable parting. In just days, this man had become important to her in ways she couldn't fully articulate. The idea of never seeing him again left an unexpected hollow feeling in her chest. "I've never properly thanked you," she said quietly, "for everything you've risked for me, a stranger." "You're not a stranger anymore, Abigail," Zachary replied, his voice equally soft. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken feelings. Abigail was acutely aware of his proximity, of the way the firelight played across his features, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the intelligence in his blue eyes. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Zachary reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered against her cheek, gentle and questioning. Abigail closed her eyes briefly at the touch, allowing herself to lean slightly into his hand. When she opened them again, Zachary had moved closer, his gaze seeking permission. "I shouldn't," she began. "Nor should I," he agreed, not moving away. "We barely know each other." "I know enough," Zachary said simply. "I know you're brave and principled. I know you risked everything to do what's right. I know that when you smile, the world seems a better place than it did a moment before." The simple honesty of his words touched something deep within Abigail. Without conscious thought, she closed the remaining distance between them, her lips finding his in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened. Zachary's arms encircled her, drawing her closer, and Abigail felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly overwhelmed her. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing unevenly. Zachary rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if savoring the moment. "I didn't plan this," he murmured. Abigail smiled, a genuine smile untinged by fear or caution for the first time in months. "Nor did I. But I'm not sorry." "Nor am I," Zachary replied, opening his eyes to meet her gaze. The tenderness she saw there made her heart constrict painfully. The rest of the night passed in quiet conversation, interrupted by occasional kisses that grew increasingly familiar, yet no less thrilling. They spoke of their pasts, their hopes, their fears, building a foundation of understanding that went far beyond their shared danger. "We should get some rest," Zachary finally said as the fire burned down to embers. "Morning will be here soon enough, and we still have decisions to make." They lay side by side beneath the stars, their bedrolls pushed together for warmth and comfort. Abigail rested her head on Zachary's shoulder, his arm around her a shield against the night's chill and her own lingering fears. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she whispered, "I'm glad fate brought me to your barn." Zachary's lips brushed her forehead. "So am I," he replied softly. "Now sleep. I'll keep watch." Despite his words, they both drifted into sleep, exhaustion finally claiming them. The desert night wrapped around them like a protective cloak, granting a few precious hours of peace. Dawn broke with the sharp crack of a rifle shot echoing off the canyon walls. Zachary was instantly awake, rolling to cover Abigail with his body as a bullet struck the ground inches from where they had been sleeping. "Stay down," he ordered, drawing his revolver and scanning the canyon rim. Another shot rang out, closer this time. Dust and stone fragments showered down as the bullet struck the canyon wall above them. "They've found us," Abigail whispered, fear constricting her throat. "They're shooting blind," Zachary replied, his voice calm despite the danger. "Trying to flush us out." He pointed to a cluster of boulders near the spring. "Get over there. Better cover." While Zachary provided covering fire, Abigail scrambled to the relative safety of the boulders, the saddlebags containing the precious ledgers clutched against her chest. Zachary followed moments later, pressing his back against the largest rock. "I count at least 3 shooters," he said grimly. "They've got the high ground and more ammunition than we do." "What do we do?" Abigail asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Zachary checked his revolver, confirming it was fully loaded. "We need to get to the horses. If we can break out of the canyon, we might lose them in the hills." Before Abigail could respond, a voice called out from the canyon rim. "Holloway, we know you're down there. Send out the woman and the ledgers and you can ride away from this." Zachary's jaw tightened. "Thornton," he muttered. "The snake himself." "We have you surrounded," Thornton continued. "There's no escape. Be reasonable, man. This isn't your fight." "Don't listen to him," Abigail said urgently, gripping Zachary's arm. "He's lying. He'll kill us both." "I know," Zachary assured her. He raised his voice to reply. "Come down here and face me like a man, Thornton, or are you only brave behind hired guns?" A volley of shots answered him, peppering their shelter with bullets. Zachary pulled Abigail closer, shielding her with his body. "I need to create a diversion," he said when the shooting paused. "Something to draw their fire while you make for the horses." "No," Abigail protested. "We stay together." "Abigail, listen to me," Zachary said urgently, his blue eyes intense. "Those ledgers are the only hope of bringing Thornton to justice. They need to reach Judge Montgomery no matter what happens to us. I won't leave you, she insisted. You must, he countered. If not for yourself, then for all the people Thornton has hurt, all the people he will hurt if he isn't stopped. The logic was irrefutable, but Abigail's heart rebelled against it. The thought of abandoning Zachary to face Thornton's men alone was unbearable. There has to be another way, she said desperately. Before Zachary could respond, the distinctive sound of multiple horses approaching fast echoed through the canyon. For a moment, Abigail's heart sank, thinking Thornton had received reinforcements. Then came the sound of gunfire, not directed at them, but at the men on the canyon rim. What the Zachary peered cautiously around their shelter. A voice bellowed from the canyon entrance. United States Marshal, throw down your weapons. Confusion erupted above them. More gunshots rang out, followed by shouting and the sound of retreating hoofbeats. Stay here, Zachary ordered, though his expression had lightened considerably. He stood, keeping to cover as much as possible, and called out, Marshal, Zachary Holloway and Abigail Keating down here. We're friendly. A moment of tense silence followed. Then a weathered face peered over the edge of the canyon. Holloway, that really you, Marshal Jenkins? Zachary replied, recognition and relief evident in his voice. How in blazes did you find us? Got a telegraph from your foreman, Daniel, the marshal replied. Said you and a lady were in trouble with some Eastern gunmen. He gestured to the men with him. Rounded up a posse and headed your way. Looks like we got here just in time. Zachary helped Abigail to her feet, his arm supportive around her waist. Thornton, he asked the marshal. Got away for now, him and one other, Jenkins replied. But we've got 3 of his men in custody and the rest scattered. He holstered his weapon and began picking his way down into the canyon. Now, suppose you tell me what kind of hornet's nest you've stirred up, Holloway. While the marshal and his men secured the area, Zachary quickly explained the situation, showing Jenkins the ledgers with their damning evidence. This is federal business for sure, Jenkins agreed after examining the books. Opium smuggling, bribing officials, murder. He glanced at Abigail with newfound respect. You took quite a risk, madam, bringing these west. A necessary one, Abigail replied simply. Jenkins nodded thoughtfully. Judge Montgomery's still in Tucson. We'll escort you there directly. With these ledgers and your testimony, we can put Thornton away for good. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Pepper's injury proved less severe than feared once properly examined, allowing her to travel slowly. By midday, their expanded party was on the move toward Tucson, with scouts ranging ahead and behind to prevent any further ambushes. Riding beside Zachary, Abigail felt a strange mixture of emotions: relief at their rescue, lingering fear of Thornton, and beneath it all, a growing certainty about her feelings for the man beside her. Your foreman saved our lives, she observed quietly. Zachary nodded. Daniel's been with me since I bought the ranch, more family than employee. He glanced at her, a question in his eyes. What happens now, Abigail, after Tucson? The question echoed their conversation from the previous night, but now carried greater weight. Abigail considered her answer carefully. I've been thinking about that, she replied. About what comes after. She met his gaze directly. I still have choices to make, places I could go. San Francisco, Zachary remembered, or Philadelphia. Yes, Abigail agreed, or I could stay in Arizona territory. The hope that flared in Zachary's eyes gave her courage to continue. This land grows on a person, she said softly, makes one want to put down roots, with the right person. Abigail, Zachary began, his voice rough with emotion. I know it's fast, she interrupted. I know we've only known each other days, not months or years. But in those days, I've seen your character more clearly than I saw my husband's in 5 years of marriage." She took a deep breath. "If you wanted, if you thought perhaps—" Zachary's hand reached across to cover hers on the reins. "I want," he said simply. "I've wanted since I found you hiding in my barn, though I scarcely understood it then." Joy bloomed within Abigail, bright and unexpected. "So much uncertainty lies ahead," she cautioned, even as her heart soared. "The trial, Thornton." "We'll face it together," Zachary promised. "One day at a time." Marshal Jenkins called back to them, interrupting the moment. "Tuckson's just beyond that ridge. We'll be at the courthouse within the hour." Reality intruded once more, reminding them that danger still lurked. Thornton remained at large, desperate, and cornered the most dangerous combination possible. "Whatever happens," Zachary said quietly, "remember what I told you that first day. No one hurts you again while I'm breathing." The simple promise, repeated now when he knew the full extent of the danger, touched Abigail deeply. She had spent so long running, so long fearing, that the prospect of someone standing beside her, fighting for her, seemed almost unreal. "I believe you," she replied, and realized it was true. Tucson in 1878 was a growing town, bustling with commerce and the mix of cultures characteristic of the borderlands. The courthouse stood prominent on the main street, a symbol of the emerging rule of law in what had once been untamed frontier. Judge Isaac Montgomery proved to be exactly as Zachary had described, a stern-faced, silver-haired man with piercing eyes that seemed to cut through pretense. He listened to Abigail's testimony in his chambers, examining the ledgers with methodical care. "These records are extensive," he observed when she had finished her account. "Names, dates, amounts, all documented with unusual precision." "My husband was meticulous in his business dealings," Abigail explained. "Even his criminal ones." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "And you say Thornton was the one who suggested covering up your husband's death? That he later framed you for murder when you discovered these ledgers?" "Yes, Your Honor," Abigail confirmed. "He knew I had evidence that could destroy him. He's been pursuing me ever since." "And nearly succeeded in silencing her," Zachary added from where he stood near the door. "If not for Marshal Jenkins and his men, we might not have made it here." Judge Montgomery steepled his fingers, considering. "This case crosses state lines, involves federal officials, and includes multiple murders. It will need to be tried in federal court." He looked directly at Abigail. "Are you prepared to testify, Mrs. Keating? It could be a lengthy process and not without risk." "I am," Abigail replied without hesitation. "Whatever it takes to see justice done." "Very well," the judge decided. "I'll issue federal warrants for Victor Thornton and all associates named in these ledgers. Marshal Jenkins will arrange protective custody for you until the trial." He turned to Zachary. "Mr. Holloway, I understand you've been instrumental in bringing this evidence to light. The court appreciates your service." "Just helping a lady in need, Your Honor," Zachary replied simply. Outside the courthouse, Marshal Jenkins outlined the security arrangements. "We'll keep Mrs. Keating at the territorial governor's residence until Thornton is apprehended. Best guarded building in Arizona." Abigail felt a pang at the thought of separation from Zachary, but safety had to take precedence. They had come too far, risked too much, to falter now. "How long will that be necessary?" she asked. "Hard to say," Jenkins admitted. "Could be days, could be weeks. Thornton's on the run, but he's got nowhere to hide. Every lawman in the territory will be looking for him." Zachary's expression was troubled as they walked toward the marshal's office. "I don't like the idea of leaving you," he told Abigail quietly. "Nor do I," she admitted. "But it's temporary." Once Thornton is captured, a shout from down the street interrupted her. They turned to see a crowd gathering, voices raised in alarm. Marshal Jenkins immediately moved toward the commotion, one hand on his holstered gun. "Stay here," he ordered Zachary and Abigail. But as Jenkins pushed through the crowd, Zachary tensed, his instincts warning him that something was wrong. "We should get inside," he told Abigail, taking her arm to guide her toward the nearest building. They had taken only a few steps when gunfire erupted from the direction of the crowd. People scattered screaming as a mounted rider burst through Victor Thornton, a wild look in his eyes and a revolver in his hand. "Keating," he shouted, spotting Abigail. "You've ruined me." Time seemed to slow as Thornton raised his gun, aiming directly at Abigail. Without hesitation, Zachary stepped in front of her, drawing his own weapon in one fluid motion. 2 shots rang out almost simultaneously. Thornton jerked in his saddle, a look of surprise crossing his face before he toppled sideways to the ground. Zachary staggered, dropping to one knee. "Zachary!" Abigail cried, falling beside him. Blood stained his shirt just below his left shoulder, spreading with alarming speed. "Did I get him?" Zachary asked through gritted teeth. "Yes," Abigail assured him, pressing her hands against the wound to stem the bleeding. "He's down, don't move." Marshal Jenkins appeared, kneeling on Zachary's other side. "Doctor's just down the street," he said, helping Abigail apply pressure to the wound. "We'll get him there." The next hours were the longest of Abigail's life as she waited outside the doctor's surgery while Zachary's wound was treated. Thornton was dead. His final, desperate attempt at revenge had failed. But the price had been high. Mrs. Keating, the doctor, an elderly man with kind eyes, emerged from the surgery room. "Mr. Holloway is asking for you." Zachary lay on a narrow bed, his upper body wrapped in white bandages, his face pale but alert. He smiled weakly as Abigail entered. "The doctor says I'll live," he said, attempting humor despite his obvious pain. "Though I might not be much use around the ranch for a while." Relief made Abigail's knees weak. She sank into the chair beside his bed, taking his hand in both of hers. "You saved my life. Again." "Seemed like the thing to do," Zachary replied, his fingers tightening around hers. "Though I admit, getting shot wasn't part of my plan." "It never is," Abigail said, trying to match his light tone despite the tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "Thornton?" Zachary asked, his expression growing serious. "Dead," Abigail confirmed. "Marshal Jenkins says his remaining men scattered when they heard." "Most have already been captured." Zachary nodded, satisfaction and relief mingling in his expression. "It's over then, really over." "Yes," Abigail agreed softly. "You kept your promise. No one hurt me. You took the bullet instead." "And I'd do it again," Zachary said, his voice gaining strength. "Abigail, I know this is fast, maybe too fast, but life's uncertain today proved that much." He took a deep breath, wincing slightly at the pain it caused. "I love you. I think I've loved you since I found you hiding in my barn. If you need time, I understand, but I wanted you to know." The simple declaration, offered without expectation or demand, broke the last of Abigail's reservations. Tears spilled freely now as she leaned forward to kiss him gently. "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "Enough to know that some things don't need time to be certain." Joy illuminated Zachary's tired face. "Does that mean you'll consider staying in Arizona, at the ranch?" "Not just consider," Abigail replied, her heart full to bursting. "If you'll have me, that's exactly where I want to be." "As my wife?" Zachary asked, hope clear in his blue eyes. "As your wife," Abigail confirmed, her smile radiant through her tears. The doctor cleared his throat from the doorway, an apologetic interruption. "Mr. Holloway needs rest, Mrs. Keating. You can continue your discussion tomorrow." Abigail blushed but nodded, rising reluctantly. "I'll be back first thing in the morning," she promised Zachary. "I'll be waiting," he replied, his eyes already growing heavy with exhaustion and medication. "Dream of me, always," Abigail assured him, pressing one last kiss to his forehead before reluctantly leaving. The next weeks passed in a blur of healing and planning. Zachary's wound, while serious, responded well to treatment. Judge Montgomery expedited the legal proceedings against Thornton's accomplices, taking Abigail's deposition so she wouldn't need to remain in Tucson for the trials. 1 month to the day after Thornton's death, Abigail stood in a simple white dress beside Zachary in Judge Montgomery's chambers, exchanging vows that sealed their unexpected but undeniable bond. Daniel served as witness, his weathered face creased with genuine pleasure at his employer's happiness. "Never thought I'd see the day," he told Abigail after the brief ceremony. "7 years I've worked for that man, and never once saw him look at a woman the way he looks at you." The return journey to the ranch was leisurely, accommodating Zachary's still healing shoulder. As they crested the final rise and the sprawling buildings of the Holloway Ranch came into view, Abigail felt a swell of emotion. "Welcome home, Mrs. Holloway," Zachary said softly, reaching across to take her hand. Home. The word held such power, such promise. After months of running, of fear and uncertainty, Abigail had found not just safety but belonging. "It's beautiful," she said, taking in the ranch bathed in golden late afternoon light. "It needs a woman's touch," Zachary admitted with a smile. "Been a bachelor establishment too long." "I'll have it feeling like home in no time," Abigail promised. "Our home." As they rode down toward the ranch house, ranch hands appeared from the various buildings, gathering to welcome their returning boss and his new bride. Their genuine warmth touched Abigail deeply, an immediate acceptance that eased her remaining anxieties about starting this new life. Martha from the Lucky Spur Saloon was there too, surprisingly, standing on the porch with a covered dish in her hands. "Couldn't let your first night as a married woman go without a proper meal," she explained gruffly when they dismounted. "Consider it my way of apologizing for doubting you when those men first came looking." "There's nothing to apologize for," Abigail assured her, touched by the gesture. "You helped me escape that day." Inside, the ranch house had been transformed. Fresh flowers adorned tables, new curtains hung at windows, and delicious smells wafted from the kitchen. "The Hand's wives," Zachary explained, seeing her surprised expression. "They've been preparing for days. Wanted everything perfect for the new mistress of the ranch." Such kindness from strangers, soon to be neighbors and friends, brought tears to Abigail's eyes. This was what she had lost sight of during her months of running. The inherent goodness in most people, the community that could form around shared values and genuine care. That night, after a celebratory dinner with Daniel and the closest of the ranch hands, Abigail and Zachary were finally alone in the master bedroom. Moonlight streamed through the windows, bathing the room in silver light as Zachary drew her into his arms. "Any regrets?" he asked softly, his fingers tracing the curve of her cheek. "Not one," Abigail replied truthfully. "How could I regret finding love and home in the same person?" His kiss was tender, a promise and a beginning all at once. As Abigail melted into her husband's embrace, the memories of fear and pursuit faded, replaced by the certain knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be. 5 years later, Abigail sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching her 3-year-old son, Henry, chase butterflies in the garden she had painstakingly cultivated. Inside, her infant daughter, Sarah, slept peacefully in her cradle, the perfect image of her father with dark hair and bright blue eyes. The ranch had prospered under their joint care. Zachary's knowledge of cattle and land combined with Abigail's head for business had expanded their holdings and influence. The Holloway Ranch was now one of the most successful in the territory, known for fair dealings and quality stock. More importantly, they had built a community. The small schoolhouse Abigail had established for the children of ranch hands and neighboring homesteaders was flourishing. Monthly gatherings brought people together for music, dancing, and the simple pleasure of connection. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew Abigail's attention. Zachary appeared, riding in from the North Range, his tall figure straight and proud in the saddle. Henry spotted his father and ran toward him, arms outstretched and face alight with joy. Dismounting swiftly, Zachary swept his son into his arms, tossing him high into the air before catching him securely. Henry's delighted giggles filled the air as Zachary carried him toward the house. "Mama, Papa's home," Henry announced unnecessarily as they reached the porch. "So I see," Abigail replied, smiling as Zachary leaned down to kiss her. 5 years of marriage had only deepened their connection, the spark between them as strong as ever. "How are my girls?" Zachary asked, settling onto the porch swing beside her with Henry in his lap. "Sarah's sleeping finally," Abigail reported. "She has your stubborn streak," Zachary chuckled. "Poor child, doomed with both our stubbornness." He looked out over their land, satisfaction evident in his expression. "The north pasture looks good. We'll have a strong herd this year." Daniel thought the same, Abigail confirmed. "He mentioned at breakfast that this might be our best season yet." Their conversation flowed easily, discussing ranch business, local news, and plans for the children's futures. As the sun began to set, painting the Arizona sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Zachary's arm tightened around Abigail's shoulders. "I got a letter from Judge Montgomery today," he said. "The last of Thornton's associates has been sentenced. 20 years in federal prison." Abigail let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "So it's truly over." "It has been for years," Zachary reminded her gently. "But yes, now it's official. Every last one of them has faced justice." She leaned her head against his shoulder, watching Henry play with the wooden horse Zachary had carved for him. "Sometimes it seems like another lifetime," she mused. "That terrified woman hiding in your barn." "In some ways, it was another lifetime," Zachary replied, his voice reflective. "For both of us." Abigail thought of the path that had brought them here, the danger, the chase, the leap of faith in trusting a stranger who had promised protection. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't hidden in your barn that day?" she asked. "If I'd chosen another place to hide?" "Sometimes," Zachary admitted. "But then I look at you, at our children, at everything we've built together, and I know it couldn't have happened any other way." He turned to meet her gaze, his blue eyes sincere. "We were meant to find each other, Abigail. I believe that with everything in me." The simple certainty in his voice resonated with Abigail's own feelings. "So do I," she whispered. As twilight deepened around them, Henry finally exhausted his seemingly boundless energy and climbed into his mother's lap, nestling against her contentedly. The little family sat together in comfortable silence, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. From inside the house came the soft cry of baby Sarah awakening. Zachary rose, dropping a kiss on Abigail's forehead. "I'll get her," he offered. Abigail watched him go, her heart full to bursting with love for this man who had kept his promise so completely. No one had hurt her again, not Thornton, not the memories of her past, not the fears that had once threatened to consume her. Instead, Zachary Holloway had given her safety, love, and a home where she truly belonged. In doing so, he had transformed her from a frightened fugitive into a confident wife, mother, and pillar of their community. When he returned, cradling their daughter with the tender expertise of a devoted father, Abigail knew with bone-deep certainty that she had found her true place in the world. Not in Boston's refined society, not in Philadelphia's familiar streets, but here in the wild beauty of Arizona territory, with this man who had risked everything to protect a stranger and ended up finding his heart's companion. As the family gathered close in the gentle darkness, the ranch around them peaceful and prosperous, Abigail reflected that some journeys, no matter how difficult or frightening, led exactly where they were meant to. Hers had led to Zachary, to love, to home, and she wouldn't change a single step.